what's the difference between an ink being classified as Iron Gall and Bulletproof or Eternal in the case of Noodler's inks? I know all these terms indicate that the ink in question will be a permanent one, correct? But is this something I should be paying attention to when shopping for a permanent ink? For example, do Noodler's Bulletproof Eternal inks have any advantages, disadvantages compared to the standard Iron Gall inks, and vice versa? Finally, will it make any difference in terms of cleaning? Iron Gall versus a Bulletproof or Eternal. Okay, so the Bulletproof Eternal thing is Noodler's term. So you're never going to see a non-Noodler's Bulletproof ink because Noodler's really has an intention of fraud resistance. So it's chemical resistant, bleach resistant, fraud resistant, UV resistant, all that kind of stuff. So that's what it means. The difference between that and Iron Gall. So they are very different. Iron Gall is a very acidic ink, and it is a very old kind of formulation of permanent inks. So when you look at like the Dead Sea Scrolls, that's some version of an Iron Gall. When you have like old like dip calligraphy, like Renaissance type inks, those are going to be Iron Gall. It's a natural material made from oak galls. Wikipedia actually has a really good page on Iron Gall ink that you can explain a whole lot. And there are some modern fountain pen inks that are Iron Gall. For example, Diamond Registrars is kind of like the most Iron Gall that I can think of. Rohrer & Klingner has Salix and Scabiosa. Those are both Iron Galls. They're a little bit lighter formulation, not quite as Iron Gall-y as the Diamond Registrars. And then I think Mont Blanc has like a blue black or like a midnight blue. I don't know exactly. I don't have their inks. I've never used it, but I've heard that that's Iron Gall. Lamy used to have Iron Gall in their blue black. That's not the case anymore. And then I think there were some others that used to be, but as companies are kind of getting away from Iron Gall inks and fountain pens, mainly because the acidity of the Iron Gall is hard wearing on some of the metal parts of the pen. And certain natural materials and stuff, it just doesn't do as well. So it's kind of a user beware kind of situation for those inks. So companies are not really using them all that much. Definitely Noodler's is using a lot of different permanent inks, but they are different than Iron Gall. They are cellulose reactive. So basically the way that they work is they're dye-based, but they react and they bond to the cellulosic fibers in your paper. So especially if you're using a wood pulp or cotton fiber paper, those are going to work really, really well with the cellulose reactive Noodler's inks. And that's what they're going to bond really well, really permanently. And it's only when you have like really heavily sized paper, like really heavily coated paper, that those inks have a harder time getting through because they're coated, so they're not as easy for the inks to get to the cellulosic fibers in the paper. So that might be a little bit of a disadvantage for some of the Noodler's inks. If you have like a watercolor type paper or a really slick paper, it can take a long time for it to dry, a long time for it to absorb and get and actually bond. But there's definitely a trade-off when it comes to using them. So as cleaning them, Iron Gall you want to clean very, very vigilantly. You know, ideally every few days, if not every week. And especially if you have a pen that it tends to dry out a lot, you don't really want those inks to dry out in your pen very much. So you want to keep them clean really diligently. You don't want to leave them sitting in your pen for a long period of time. And the Noodler's inks, though, are different. They're much more conventional ink, a lot safer, if you want to call it that. So you don't have to be quite as careful because it's, you know, unless you're dealing with a true cellulosic pen, like a wood pen or like a pure celluloid pen, like you wouldn't want to eyedropper convert a celluloid pen with these Noodler's permanent inks because celluloid is a cellulosic material and it's going to bond and you wouldn't want to stain your pen. So you just want to be careful about certain types of pens and certain types of inks and stuff like that. But I can't say that using an Iron Gall would be a particularly great idea in a celluloid pen either. So either way, you know, if you're dealing with something like a celluloid, just use conventional inks. Don't use anything permanent. So other than these kind of like special exceptions, I would say in general, the Noodler's permanent inks are going to be lower maintenance and a little less hassle than an Iron Gall. But Iron Gall inks are not exactly prevalent anyway. So in general, your selection for colors and stuff are going to be better with the Noodlers, but hopefully that helps you out.